Okay, let's talk about the label. All of our glazes, there are different types of glazes. The one we're using in particular here is velvet underglaze. That is the best one to use on a greenware state, a leather hard state. It does fire as a matte, so keep that in mind. The fork and the knife indicate that it is food safe. If you ever see a line that goes across it, that's going to tell you that it is not food safe. There is usually a letter and number associated with it. That's because there's a lot of colors. That one is actually bright orange, and they actually have a color name. Below it are the directions, and it'll tell you how many coats you need to get a good, nice, saturated color, and then what we're firing our piece to. This is a low fire glaze. That means it's going to fire to a cone 05, which is about 1800 plus degrees. You always want to make sure you shake it really well. Make sure the lid's on real nice and tight before you do that. And we're going to do Sgraffito, which means that we're going to work on a leather hard clay body. We want to paint our glaze on nice and even. And just like the label says, you can do up to 3 layers. It will take you a little time to make sure that each coat is dry. And it takes a while because your clay body is wet. And so it cannot absorb as quickly. So it might take a little time. You might be sitting there. So oftentimes when we're glazing, we can be doing other things as in the meantime. So getting that nice and even coat is important. I think for time's sake, I only did like 2 coats with this. And then you're going to take a ribbon tool or a Sgraffito tool, and you're going to carve away any of your designs. And now I'm just doing simple lines, but you can do even larger spaces where you're carving away larger chunks. And what is going to happen when it fires is those lines are going to show the actual color of the clay body, which is like a red clay, kind of a pinky red color. And then, of course, the area surrounding it, the negative space of those lines, is going to be that lilac color. You usually want to pick something that is contrasting, like if it's a dark clay body, you want a light color, or if it's a light, like a white clay body, you might pick a dark color. All right, so then the next one is going to be masking. With masking, I just simply used newspaper, like from a mailing that I got. I don't know, it looks like an academy mailing. I cut different shapes from it. And you're gonna wanna get that paper really damp and make sure that it's sealed really close to the clay body. So I use that sponge there. I don't want it to be oversaturated. And then you're going to paint. Again, for time's sake, I think I did 1 coat, but you could wait, let it dry, do multiple coats so that you can get a nicer, bolder color. You can choose to just do 1 coat or 2 coats. It will give you a different look. So that is definitely something that you'll learn as you continue to work with clay and glazes. And you can see you're going to pull up your little masking bits. And you'll see that the shape that we cut is what we've just protected. So you can get some neat effects. And of course, I just did abstracted geometric shapes. It wasn't sealed 100% on the edges. You can see where the glaze leaked under. So again, I was pressed on time. I just kind of rushed it. If I had taken maybe a rib, I could have smoothed it out a little bit. So we're just moving along really fast. Here is our wax resist Sgraffito effect. I'm just using my finger, but a lot of times we just use a brush. And it's just a really liquidy wax. And it's just like when you were in elementary school where you might have taken a crayon and drew with it, and then if you paint on the surface, you will see the paint kind of just immediately retracts off of that waxy part of the crayon. And so it does the same thing here with ceramic clay. So I covered the whole surface with that wax. And now I'm going to do, again, those same lines, those wavy lines like I did on the other one. But this is actually going to end up being kind of a little bit of a reverse of the regular Sgraffito. So wherever I'm carving those lines, I'm going to later apply my glaze on that surface so that, and it will kind of sit in those little reservoirs where I created these designs. So in the kiln, the wax will burn away and we'll only see the clay body that is the surface of most of that side of that pyramid. And then the line work will be the lilac glazes, which I will paint on there. And of course, my video, I have sped it up, sorry, with for time's sake. So just know that a lot of this does take quite a bit of time for craftsmanship purposes, and obviously you'll take greater care in your design. So I'm just going to take here's my underglaze and apply it, and it's just going to sit in those areas I carved away. I just have that water-based glaze that's going to really be drying and sticking to the water-based clay. And everywhere that I have my wax, it's actually being repelled, and you kind of can see it kind of puddle up and kind of pool away from those areas. And so a way to just, for some of the excess that's pooling up, I just took a damp sponge and I'm going to wipe off of that surface, and you'll see here as I hold it up how that will look. Now the wax resist does dry eventually kind of clear. I didn't wait like super long time, so it hasn't really dried out probably completely. Still has that yellow look to it, but that's what happens with it. When we talk about monoprinting, it's a way we can create a design on a piece of paper and then apply it to a surface. So it's just a different way of applying a design. You want to think about your design in reverse, like what colors are going to go on top, and you'll paint those first, and then the colors that you add after that are going to be more of the background color. So these are actually two different designs, but you'll see here I actually took that piece of paper and I put it on the edge. I want to make sure I get that paper nice and damp again with my sponge. I use my rib to really rub and press, see right there, onto the surface. And then when I feel like I've gotten a good amount of contact, then I'll gently pull the paper away. Now, if I had maybe worked with it a little bit more, maybe added a little bit more damp, maybe hit my rib a little bit more, I might have had more transfer. You can see it is slightly splotchy there. You can see where it didn't take the full design, didn't come down. And that's just typically what happens. Now, if you don't like that look, then maybe monoprint's not for you. I like that aesthetic. I like kind of the worn and weathered look of that. And so I do like the mono print there. Let's talk about what happens once we fire the piece. It becomes a bisque piece. That's the first level of firing. You always want to take a little piece of sandpaper and sand down any of your rough areas. Sometimes we have edges that are really sharp or rough. We can take a little sandpaper and smooth those out. And then you always, always, always want to wipe it down because it gets a little dusty in the kiln, and dust can cause major technical issues when we go to the glazing part. Masking is a little different here. This time now I'm using masking tape, and I just took several pieces of masking tape to make like a wider surface, and I cut triangles out of it. And so once I cut those out, I want to make sure that I push down on the surface and make sure I get a good seal from that masking tape. You can see that the glaze dries way faster when we're talking about bisque because the bisque piece is completely without any moisture. When the firing process, it removed anything. It made that clay very durable, and so it's like almost like a sponge. It's going to take the moisture that's in that glaze and just absorb it really fast. And you can even watch it. You're literally watching it dry right now. You can see it turns kind of chalky looking when it's dry like that. And again, you want to make sure they are dry between applying layers, again, just like you would at the leather hard state. And so whatever designs you want to do, you can do that with the tape. I've seen people even using painter's tape, mechanical or electrical tape. It doesn't matter as long as it just has a good seal on the bisque body. Works. I've seen there's because there's even tape that you can buy that's like a 1/4 inch thick or an 1/8 of an inch thick. And I'll have to share those artists with you that do a masking technique with different thicknesses of tape. So once it's dry completely, you will remove those tape pieces. We won't fire it with the tape on there. And I just used a little bit of a tool just to get a corner of that tape up and then peel it up. And you can see how nice and clean it was in that process. This went fast, so you might have to pause it and check it out. This one is actually, I wiped it down with the sponge, but I rushed my process and it wasn't dry completely. So the tape did not adhere to the surface very well. And you can see that the edges are really not very clean at all. It's quite disappointing. But I'm rushing myself as I've been doing these techniques. And so when I wiped it down, I didn't wait long enough. And so again, I mean, who knows? It might be something that totally is along the line of the aesthetic that you want, but you got to make something look like purposeful that is like that. Right now, in its state that it's in, if I did some more techniques on top of it that kind of continue to have that weathered look, it might look intentional. But right now, the way that it is, it actually just looks sloppy and rushed. So you can see how it looks nice and clean on the inside, but a little splotchy on the outside where I didn't let it dry. So we can use wax resist in the bisque form as well. And actually we have a lot of uses for that in that. I'm just doing it on a raw clay body in the bisque form. You can see I'm using just a small little brush. But you can also use it in between firing. So you can actually fire several times. So I could like take this little bowl, have maybe glazed it red, then fired it, and then once it's out of the fire, or even before the fire too, I could take some wax resist and apply it in some areas and then paint another color on top of it. And then wherever I put that wax resist would be the barrier where the previous color is going to shine through. And with this one, since it's on the raw clay body, wherever I'm applying the wax resist is going to show the clay body after it fires. And again, all of that will burn away. We are talking about firing at over 1800 degrees. It probably melts away way sooner than that. So early on in the process of firing, it will go. And I just made up a design. Again, super quick. You want to let it dry, and I told you it dries pretty transparent, but since I used it pretty thick, you can see it does have that yellowy ochre color. And I'm going to glaze it. And again, you'll see I'm not glazing the bottom. And I'm even leaving a little bit of space from where the bottom of the piece is to where the bottom of the glaze will end. Okay. This one I put a coal at the bottom because I plan to make it like a little planter pot. And I think I'm going to put a different color on the inside. So I only painted the lilac on the outside and then the top lip of my bowl. And this one actually was a piece I threw on the wheel last year. And it was sitting in there, and I fired it when I fired a bunch of y'all's work recently. And I'm applying the second coat. So as soon as I see that the first coat's dry, I can go ahead and add that first coat on there. And like I said, you can tell, obviously, look how dark it is when I first initially glaze. Once it dries, it turns into that lighter color, chalky kind of looking. There it goes again. I can do my final coat on there. I do want it to dry in between, like I said, because that is, otherwise I might be wiping away the previous wet layer. I'm not really building the coats. It's not very productive. Okay, so there you go. There is the wax resist, and once I fire it, then you'll see where all that yellow is actually going to be the white of the clay. Now, when it's under glaze, I can go ahead and put a gloss glaze at the end if I choose to. That is an option as well, and make it glossy, which also darkens the color. But that is just a few glazing techniques for you.